So very good morning to all those joining us from India and the world. We are back once again with breakfast news to give a new start to your day and a new start to your week. Well, the UN's COP27 Climate Summit kicked off in Egypt on Sunday, and British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak will address the summit in Egypt today. And if we talk of India, India is hosting a pavilion with the theme of life, lifestyle for environment. That's a pledge that India has given to the world to adopt environment-friendly initiatives, because we have only one planet Earth. Yes. I am Tanvi Taneja, and with me this morning is Preeti Bhalla. Preeti, good morning.
Good morning, Tanvi, and a warm morning to you too. And yes, she has summed up what all is to be taken up in COP27, but we'll get to the details, and we'll also get to extra inputs from our reporter also. Added to that, we'll also get to everything else that has been making it to the headlines, be it sports, be it national headlines, be it international updates, or for that matter, updates from the world of business. Enough to keep you engaged for the next 1 hour. First, the top stories.
External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar to begin his official visit to Russia today. The External Affairs Minister to meet his counterpart Sergei Lavrov along with other dignitaries. Discussions are expected to cover bilateral issues as well as various regional and international developments.
MoS for External Affairs V. Muraleedharan to embark on an official visit to Brazil today. During the visit, the minister will attend the solemn session on 75 years of independence of India to be held in Brazilian Parliament. MoS will also call on high-level delegates.
At COP27, India welcomes adoption of the agenda item loss and damage. Union Minister Bhupendra Yadav to speak today at the UN Secretary General High-Level Roundtable. He will also address an event on Middle East Green Initiative later in the day.
Ukrainian president says Russia is suffering heavy losses in continuing fierce attacks in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region. Further warns about Russian preparation for new assaults on Ukrainian energy infrastructure.
North Korea slams South Korea-US drills, calls the vigilant storm drills open provocation, also vow resolute response to the drills. North Korea test-fired multiple missiles, including a possible failed ICBM last week.
New protests erupt in Iran at universities and in the largely Kurdish northwest region. The protests triggered by the death of Mahsa Amini continue in its 7th week amid a fierce government crackdown.
At least 19 people die as the passenger plane crashes into Lake Victoria in Tanzania. 2 persons still missing. Investigation on to find out the causes behind the crash.
And in sports, Holger Rune upsets Novak Djokovic to win Paris Masters. Beat 6-time champion after coming from a set down to win 3-6, 6-3, 7-5.
Arsenal moves back to the top of the Premier League, beats Chelsea 1-0. Gabriel Magalhaes scores the only goal of the match.
All right, those are the top stories. Let's get to the news in detail. We get to the top story we're following, External Affairs Minister's visit to Russia.
Yes, so External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar will begin his 2-day official visit to the Russian Federation from today. During the visit, the External Affairs Minister will meet his counterpart, Sergei Lavrov. Discussions are expected to cover the entire range of bilateral issues as well as exchange of views on various regional and international developments. The External Affairs Minister will also meet Deputy Prime Minister of the Russian Federation and Minister of Trade and Industry, Denis Manturov, who is his counterpart for the India-Russia Intergovernmental Commission on Trade, Economic, Scientific, Technological and Cultural Cooperation. Issues pertaining to bilateral economic cooperation in various domains will be discussed. The visit will be in continuation of the regular high-level dialogue between the two sides. External Affairs Minister had last visited Russia in July 2021, followed by visit of the Russian Foreign Minister to New Delhi in April 2022.
Minister of State for External Affairs V. Muraleedharan will begin his two-day official visit to Brazil from today. This will be his first ever visit to Brazil and is part of the high-level exchanges between India and Brazil. During the visit, the minister will attend the solemn session on 75 years of India's independence tomorrow. That will be held in the Brazilian Parliament. He will address the congregation of Brazilian parliamentarians, both from the upper and lower house, representatives of the diplomatic corps and international organizations, representatives of the Brazilian government and Friends of India. During the visit, the minister will call on the Vice President of Brazil and have interactions at the Brazilian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He will also meet the Indian community at Sao Paulo and participate in a reception in Brasilia with members of the Congress and Senate, diplomats, members of the Brazilian government and the Indian community.
So those were the high-level visits expected from today. And now we move on to our next section where we give you news from across the world. So the UN Climate Summit is taking place in Egypt amid growing calls for the rich countries to compensate poorer nations that are most vulnerable to climate change. Here's some context for you. At the 2021 summit in the United Kingdom, developed nations of the world blocked a proposal for what was called a loss and damage financing body. This year in Egypt, the focus is clearly and firmly on climate compensation. India says it looks forward to substantial progress on discussions related to climate finance, as well as clarity on its definition. India also says that it will support the Egyptian presidency for a plan of action that answers the needs of developing countries. Meanwhile, Union Minister Bhupendra Yadav will speak at the UN Secretary General High-Level Roundtable today. He will also address an event on Middle East Green Initiative later in the day.
The UN's COP27 Climate Summit kicked off in Egypt on Sunday after a year of extreme weather disasters that have underscored the urgent need for global action. Delegates from nearly 200 countries gathered in the Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh for the 13-day conference, with leaders arriving on Monday and Tuesday. COP27 Summit follows a year of disasters, from floods that killed more than 1,700 people in Pakistan to drought-withering crops in China, Africa and the US West. Attendees are expected to address the issue of loss and damage fund that has seen resistance from rich countries. The Loss and Damage Fund is a compensation fund provided by wealthy nations to vulnerable low-income countries that bear little responsibility for climate warming emissions. At COP26 last year in Glasgow, high-income nations blocked a proposal for a loss and damage financing body, instead supporting a new 3-year dialogue for funding discussions. Delegates at the UN's COP27 Climate Summit in Egypt on Sunday agreed to discuss whether rich nations should compensate poor countries most vulnerable to climate change for their suffering.
I particularly welcome the agreement of the parties to include a new agenda item on funding arrangements to respond to loss and damage. This creates, for the first time, an institutionally stable space on the formal agenda of the COP and the Paris Agreement to discuss the pressing issue of funding arrangements needed to deal with existing gaps in responding to loss and damage.
Outgoing COP President Alok Sharma, who on Sunday handed over the presidency of the UN's COP26 Climate Summit program to his counterpart at the start of the COP27 meeting in Egypt, said he fully recognizes the scale of the challenges ahead, but he remains hopeful.
We have been buffeted by global headwinds that have tested our ability to make progress. Putin's brutal and illegal war in Ukraine has precipitated multiple global crises: energy and food insecurity, inflationary pressures and spiraling debt. And these crises have compounded existing climate vulnerabilities and the scarring effects of the pandemic. And yet, despite this context, there has been some progress in implementing the commitments that we delivered in Glasgow. Over 90% of the global economy is now covered by a net zero target, up from less than 30% when the UK took on the COP26 role.
Meanwhile, India has already set itself tougher targets for cutting carbon dioxide emissions and increasing its clean energy generation capacity by 2030, largely off the back of significant progress in its solar power industry. Union Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Bhupinder Yadav, is leading the Indian delegation at the 27th session of Conference of Parties of the UNFCCC. In a statement, the Ministry of Environment said, India is fully engaged with the process and is supportive of the efforts by the government of Egypt for substantive outcomes at COP27. India looks forward to substantial progress on the discussions related to climate finance and clarity on its definition. India will support the Egyptian presidency for a plan of action that answers the needs of developing countries. Adaptation and loss and damage are two issues at the center of attention, and a progress on these two issues will complement each other. On the global goal on adaptation, there needs to be significant progress on actions, indicators and metrics. India will emphasize again on its invitation to all countries to join the LIFE movement, Lifestyle for Environment. As COP27 opened, the UN released a new report it described as a chronicle of climate chaos. The need for action was laid bare in the latest report from the UN's World Meteorological Organization. In the State of the Global Climate Report 2022, scientists estimate that global temperatures have now risen by 1.15 degrees Celsius since pre-industrial times, and said the latest 8 years were on track to be the warmest on record. The urgency of the climate change issue has been evident during the past 12 months, with devastating flooding in Pakistan as well as in places including Nigeria and extreme heat in Europe. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said on the release of the report that it was clear the planet is sending a distress signal. DD India.
And for details on the COP27 Summit, we are joined by our correspondent Tapas Bhattacharya. Tapas, a very good morning to you. As we heard in our report, climate finance appears to be the most pressing agenda of this COP27 underway in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. We know that the summit has opened with the inclusion of the loss and damage agenda. If you could throw some light for our viewers on this loss and damage, what is this loss and damage agenda?
Loss and damage is also related to a bit of climate finance and everything. In fact, all the points that have been raised and in fact have been mentioned in this particular report are interrelated. It's not that they are working on in a isolation. Let's talk about first with the loss and damage. Loss and damage is basically the if for instance there is the country which is let's say Mauritius, or for that matter a country which is not high in the sea level, and because of the rise in the sea level, because of the global warming and the meltdown of the Arctic ice, what happens is that the level of sea has increased, and what it has done is it has created a major impact for all those countries which are island countries, island nations, or for that matter are very susceptible to any change in the atmosphere and in the change in the sea level. So those countries are seeing a lot of problems, especially weather changes and hurricanes and the increase in the sea level. That actually created a lot of problem for their own economy, as well as they are struggling with that. And most of the, and if you take a close look at the world, you realize that most of the countries, or for that matter, most of the civilization are on the banks of major seas or oceans. So that actually created a lot of problem for all these countries, and they are saying that who's responsible for that? We are not responsible. Our carbon emission is negligible, but it is the work of the developed countries, which they have to bear brunt of. So they should be, giving us giving them a lot.
Right.
And, point how much income. So that I may use. That's the major summary. Now, climate finance is related to that, and climate finance. The definition of climate finance is an area of concern. That is where India has been leading from the front, especially both in COP26 as well as in COP27. The definition of climate finance has not been yet done, and the Western countries have, after the Paris Agreement, have, and also in COP26, they have reiterated their commitment for $100 billion climate finance. Now, India leading the countries has asked that where is this $100 billion? They have been talking. Jaishankar have been talking about the fact that this particular money will be coming, this particular finance will be coming, but where is it? So the walk the talk is not happening, and that is where India's Union Minister Bhupendra Yadav has said that this particular COP should be a COP for action, and countries, the developed countries especially, which are primarily responsible for this particular change, they should actually come forward and walk the talk and play, and the commitment that they have made, they should work on that.
All right, so you've put into perspective for us the loss and damage financing body tapas, but we've seen how the world has been facing the brunt of weather fury, be it hurricanes, be it flooding, or for that matter droughts in most of the parts of the world. The climatic conditions, the extreme of climatic conditions that are being witnessed across the world. Having said that, when we talk of this year's summit in comparison to the last year's summit, the developing nations of the world blocked the proposal which you have put into perspective for us. I want you to explain to us what has been the take of these developed nations. Why are they not walking the talk? One. And secondly, when we talk of the discussions, climate financing is a very important aspect of the COP27 is what you tell us. How binding would it be for the participating countries, for the member countries, to stick to what all has been discussed and what all has been finalized? Because again, doing something on paper and not implementing it would not make would not lead to any good for anybody. So having said that, how important is this forum when we talk of COP27 as a forum for the countries, a binding forum for the countries to adhere to whatever has been decided? And also, what is it that is stopping the developed nations from walking the talk?
Right, so there are a few points that you have raised, and quite valid points, Preeti. And let's just talk about the fact that first, let's start with you spoke about climate finance and why they're not doing it. It's not a simple thing, when you're talking about the climate finance, I mentioned that the definition has still not been done. When you're talking about climate finance, does it mean that the government is financing that? Does it mean that the private companies are financing? Does it mean that the NGO is financing? If who's financing them, how will that be quantified? That is something that is still not being done, and that is a major issue. The other point that is contentious is of technology transfer. Western countries or the developed countries has a monopoly, or for that matter, a major stake in technology, which is the green fuel, or for that matter, that can help the developing countries. But they are not been able to they are not sharing with the developing countries, and even if they are sharing, it is the price or it is quite exorbitantly high. So those are things that have been have been talked about in this particular COP. Also, last year also COP, there was a heated discussion on this. You mentioned the fact that why is it binding? It is going to be binding if the respective countries ratify it, and that is the major problem. Most of the countries are talking about it, but they are not ratifying it. And ratifying, I mean going back to their own country in their own parliament and ratifying it in there. US is a classic example. Remember, during Trump time, it actually, it actually distanced itself from all such climate agreements. So that is one point. The other point is that there is something called NDCs, nationally determined things that each and every country says that these are the levels of the pollution control, or for that matter environmental concern that we are going to put forth. India's NDCs, India has fished in NDC in 2010, in 2014. We have actually been able to meet our NDC targets much earlier, and if you compare it with any other countries, for that matter, the developed countries, they have neither been able to meet that, or for that matter, they have never not able to even come close to that. And that is where the problem is, that the walk the talk that we have been talking about, that you've been talking about reducing carbon emission. You have been talking, the Western countries' point is that currently the most carbon emission that comes is from China and India. Now, India's first point is that we are not historically historically we haven't increased the carbon emission. The carbon emission, or what you call the point that is currently being raised of the current climate situation, climate condition, has been done historically by the developed countries, the Western countries, from the time of Industrial Revolution, when they went absolutely bonkers when it comes to the increasing the greenhouse effect. And it is their responsibility, it is historically their responsibility to work on that. And even now, with both China and India, the carbon emission is almost negligible in comparison to what the Western countries are doing. So those are the major points of differences, and that is where these are the sticking points actually, where both developed countries and developing countries, and India is leading leading the South bloc, and that is putting a lot of pressure on these countries. And hopefully by the end of 18th of this month, we might see some action, but it's too early. But
right.
one hope that these countries come together on one platform and say that yes, this is what we need to do. We need to really put action into our talk into action, and make this planet a better place.
All right, Tapas, we'll end it here. Thank you for joining in with your inputs. That was our correspondent explaining to us what is there at the agenda of the COP27 as representatives of the countries meet in Egypt to take a call on the crisis, the climate crisis that is, that is in fact hampering the day-to-day lives in, in almost all the parts of the world. And also we'll have to see, because a call has to be taken urgently, and that is what is the need of the hour. We'll keep you updated. Let's turn focus to other updates.
Right. So climate activists,
in fact, yes, climate activists picketed calling for urgent action as delegates gathered on Sunday on the procedural opening of the COP27 in Egypt. Youth are all set to be negotiating for their future at the conference, calling for leaders to commit to climate justice and to effectively implement discussions on climate compensation as pledged during the very first day of Sharm el-Sheikh's meeting. A few activists protesting outside COP27 venue said protests remain a vital method of communicating demands to the leaders. Now this year, for the first time in the history of COP, children will also have an official space at the UN Climate Change Conference, allowing them to hold discussions and policy briefings with the youth.
Protests are always important, but especially at COPs, because this is where world leaders and people in power gather to discuss the fate of humanity and the world in itself. And that is why a lot of activists come to observe those negotiations and understand where we're heading, because this is the future of our planet in the hands of few. And protests are a means out of many methods to convey what we are feeling and what we want for each other and for the planet.
so those are the young climate activists pressing their voice and need for urgent action at the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. This conference, COP27, is on till November 18th, so lots to look forward to. Time now to slip into a short break here on Breakfast News. More international news on the other side. Stay with us.
As the day unfolds and news and events take shape, we get you complete coverage of every news breaking in, tracking new developments as they happen. Midday Prime English, Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. on DD India.
Welcome back. Shifting our attention now to the Korean Peninsula.
Yes.
Tensions are again heating up there. The North Korean military has described the recent US-South Korean military exercises as an open provocation and dangerous war drill, and has threatened to respond to them with sustained, resolute and overwhelming military actions. Last week, North Korea test-fired multiple missiles, including a possible failed intercontinental ballistic missile or ICBM, and hundreds of artillery shells into the sea, as South Korea and the United States carried out 6-day air drills until Saturday. The North Korea's military said that the vigilant storm exercises were an open provocation aimed at intentionally escalating the tension and a dangerous war drill of very high aggressive nature. In the vigilant storm drills, hundreds of US and South Korean jets, including potent B-1B heavy bombers, participated in an action that, according to the South Korean Joint Chiefs of Staff, showed the capability and the readiness to firmly respond to any provocations from North Korea.
The enemy's large-scale combined air drill is in fact an open provocation aimed at internationally escalating the tension in the region and a dangerous war drill of very high aggressive nature directly targeting at our country. The recent corresponding military operations by Korean People's Army are our clear answer that the more persistently the enemy's provocation military move continues, the more thoroughly and mercilessly we'll counter them. This is the principle and direction of action of our armed forces in the future too.
In the East African country Tanzania, a passenger plane crashed into Lake Victoria on Sunday, killing at least 19 people. 2 passengers went missing, while the airline informed that 24 survivors have been rescued till now. The airline said the rescued have been taken to hospital. The deadly incident happened when the plane, operated by Precision Air, was attempting to land at a nearby airport, and that too during storm and heavy rainfall. Rescuers were immediately rushed to the wreckage, which was almost fully submerged, to pull out trapped passengers. The investigation is still underway.
We will continue to provide support for the victims and their families here in Dar es Salaam and Bukoba. We ask the affected families to remain calm at this time while the evacuation process is ongoing. The report we have is that people who were rescued were taken to a government hospital and are receiving treatment. We have opened the center for the sake of passengers who are affected and the relatives who are following the rescue efforts. The Center Family Assistance. We have opened family assistance centers to provide information of the incident. We urge journalists to disseminate the correct information from reliable sources.
Next, updates from the war in Ukraine. Heavy fighting continues in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky claimed that his forces have been inflicting heavy losses on Russian military in eastern Donetsk region. He also blamed Moscow of preparing for fresh assaults on Ukrainian energy infrastructure. Zelensky said that he believed Russia was concentrating forces and means for a possible repetition of mass attacks on their infrastructure energy in the first instance.
Very harsh Russian attacks on the Donetsk region continue. The enemy suffers serious losses there, but despite everything, despite any losses, continues to drive its mobilized and mercenaries to their deaths. I thank all our soldiers who are withstanding this truly terrible pressure, who remain steadfast and heroically defend our positions.
Ukrainian efforts to defend the territory are on, thwarting Russian forces even in Moscow-held regions. In the latest development, the head of the Russian-backed Donetsk administration said that Ukrainian forces shelled Linensky district in Donetsk on Sunday. Alexei Kalenzin also said that Ukrainian troops also hit Budanovsky district of the city. A residential house was almost totally destroyed, but no casualties have been reported. A neighbor said the owner was lucky not to be in the house at the time of shelling. Donetsk city has been controlled by the Russian-backed Donetsk People's Republic since 2014. Russia moved in September to annex Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson and Zaporizhia regions of Ukraine in the biggest expansion of Russian territory in at least half a century.
So in midst of the unabated war in Ukraine, US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan held undisclosed talks with top aides of Russian President Vladimir Putin. As per the US and its allied officials, Sullivan has warned Moscow against using nuclear or other weapons of mass destruction in its war with Ukraine. The officials said that the US National Security has been in contact with Yuri Ushakov, a foreign policy advisor to Putin. Sullivan also has spoken with his direct counterpart in the Russian government, Nikolai Patrushev. The officials informed that the objective of the talk has been to guard against the risk of escalation and to keep communication channels open and not to discuss a settlement of the war in Ukraine. Although the White House has not publicly acknowledged any calls between Sullivan and any senior Russian official since March.
All right, shifting focus now. Protests over the hijab row have seen to be escalated in Iran on Saturday, in fact on Sunday, as demonstrators are still keeping 7-week anti-regime movement going, even in the face of a fierce crackdown at universities and largely in the Kurdish northwest. According to Norway-based Hengor Rights Group, the fresh string of protests soared as security forces opened fire on Sunday at a protest in Marivan, a town in Kurdistan province, wounding 35 people. Though it was not immediately possible to verify the toll, the latest protest was sparked by the death in Tehran of a Kurdish student from Marivan, Nasreen Ghadri, who, according to Hengor, died on Saturday after being beaten over the head by police. Meanwhile, Iranian authorities have not yet commented on the cause of her death.
And now let's update you on the aftermath of the election results in Brazil. So weeks after Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva got elected as Brazil's new president, protesters supporting Jair Bolsonaro have taken to the streets to show their disagreement with the results. The demonstrators on Sunday demanded an armed forces intervention and reject the electoral victory of President-elect Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Moreover, protesters also waved Brazil's yellow and green flags and chanted slogans such as SOS Armed Forces. On the other hand, supporters of President-elect Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva celebrated the victory of the leftist leader near Copacabana Beach in Rio de Janeiro.
At the issue of the migrants rescued by charity groups off the Italian coast escalates, Pope Francis, during his return trip from Bahrain, said that the migrants must be welcomed, accompanied, promoted and integrated, and that every EU government must agree on how many migrants it can receive. Pope was addressing an airborne news conference on the plane returning to Rome from his 4-day trip to Bahrain.
promossi e integrati.
Migrants must be welcomed, accompanied, promoted and integrated. If you cannot do these 4 steps, you are not going to do a good job with migrants. Welcomed, accompanied, promoted and integrated. To go as far as integration. And the second thing I say is that every EU government must agree on how many migrants it can receive. Because otherwise there are only 4 countries that receive migrants: Cyprus, Greece, Italy and Spain, which are those closest to the Mediterranean. Inland there are others: Poland, Belarus.
Furthermore, Pope also commented on the role of women in Vatican, where he said that women whom he has appointed in the Vatican have proved that they can be better managers than men, and that there is too much male chauvinism in the Roman Catholic Church and society at large.
The woman has her own way of solving problems, which is not the same as that of man, and both parts must work together. Woman, like man, works for the common good, with the intuition that belongs to women. I have noticed that every time a woman is given a responsibility in the Vatican, things improve. For example, the Deputy Governor of the Vatican is a woman, and things have changed for the better. In the Economic Council, there are 6 cardinals and 6 laymen, all males. I have made a change, and among the laymen, I put 1 man and 5 women. And this is a revolution because women know how to find the right way to go forward.
Okay, after those international news, we will now move on to our next segment where we give you news from the world of business, BizBuzz. So first news from Twitter. Twitter on Saturday updated its app in Apple's App Store to begin charging $8 for the sought-after blue check verification marks in Elon Musk's first major revision of the social media platform. Making a clarification on the same, Twitter chief Elon Musk said on Sunday that Twitter users engaging in impersonation without clearly specifying it as a parody account will be permanently suspended without a warning. In a separate tweet, Musk said Twitter previously issued a warning before suspension, but as Twitter is rolling out widespread verification, there will be no warning as well as no exceptions. This will be clearly identified as a condition for signing up to get Twitter Blue. Musk said adding any name change at all will cause temporary loss of the verified checkmark.
Meanwhile, in another development, after Twitter Inc. laid off roughly half of its staff on Friday following Elon Musk's $44 billion acquisition, the company is now reaching out to dozens of employees who lost their jobs and is asking them to return. The news comes as per sources, which also says that some of those who are being asked to return were laid off by mistake. The report further added that others were let go before management realized that their work and experience may be necessary to build the new features Elon Musk envisions. Twitter recently laid off 50% of its employees, including employees on the trust and safety team. Tweets by staff of the social media company said that teams responsible for communications, content curation, human rights, and machine learning ethics were among those gutted, as were some product and engineering teams.
So you're seeing on your screens the offices of Meta. So after Twitter, Meta Platforms Inc., the parent company of Facebook, is planning to begin large-scale layoffs this week that will affect thousands of employees. Now this is what the Wall Street Journal has reported on Sunday, citing people familiar with the matter, with an announcement planned as early as Wednesday. Now Meta declined to comment on this report. Facebook parent Meta in October forecasted a weak holiday quarter and significantly more costs next year, wiping about $67 billion off Meta's stock market value, adding to more than $500 billion in value already lost this year. The disappointing outlook comes as Meta is contending with slowing global economic growth, competition from TikTok, privacy changes from Apple, concerns about massive spending on the metaverse, and the ever-present threat of regulation.
Taiwan's Foxconn, Apple Inc.'s biggest iPhone maker, said on Monday that it was working to resume full production at a major plant in China's Zhengzhou as soon as possible that has been hit by COVID curbs and also revised down its fourth quarter outlook. China ordered an industrial park that houses an iPhone factory belonging to Foxconn to enter a 7-day lockdown on Wednesday in a move set to intensify pressure on the Apple supplier as it scrambles to quell worker discontent at the base. The Zhengzhou Airport Economy Zone in central China said that it would impose silent management measures with immediate effect, including barring all residents from going out and only allowing approved vehicles on roads within that area. Foxconn, the world's largest contract electronics maker, said in a statement that the provincial government in Henan, where Zhengzhou is located, has made it clear that it will, as always, fully support Foxconn in Henan. All right, up next we're heading for a short break. When we come back, we'll get you all the domestic headlines. Stay with us.
The changing world of news. Headlines that you wake up to. News that shapes your day. Stories that matter to you. The latest and most accurate updates. A fresh start to a new day. The Breakfast News, Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. on DD India.
So welcome back, and now we bring you news that are making headlines from back home, and Preeti will tell you next.
We'll get to the details. The Constitution Bench of the Supreme Court will in fact give its verdict today on a bench of petitions challenging the reservation to the economically weaker sections of general category. In 2019, through the 103rd Constitutional Amendment, the centre had given 10% reservation to the economically weaker sections of the general category in government jobs and educational institutions. Over 40 petitions had been filed in the apex court arguing that a reservation on the basis of economic status is against the basic structure of the constitution. And Vikas Arthi is joining us to get us more on that. Vikas, the Constitution Bench of the Supreme Court will in fact give its verdict on the petitions, but we want to understand from you more background on the issue, because we've told our viewers that this matter dates back in 2019 when the 103rd Constitution Amendment, it refers to that amendment wherein 10% reservation had been given to the economically weaker sections of the society, but now more than 40 petitions, in fact, not now, but over the years since 2019, more than 40 petitions had been filed. Let us understand more background to this issue first.
Right, Preeti, more than 40 petitions had been filed in the Supreme Court, and the first petition which had been filed by the in the Supreme Court was from the NGO Janhit Manch, and after that several other petitions filed along with that. The main argument in those petitions was that the economic status cannot be a ground to give any kind of reservation, and in fact the then Attorney General K.K. Venugopal identified three major issues for the Supreme Court. The first issue was that can economic status be a ground of any kind of reservation. The second issue which he decided was that can government force private unaided institutes to implement such kind of reservation. And third point was if the sole criteria of this reservation is economic backwardness, then can the candidates from the other group denied this kind of reservation based on economic status. So these three issues were placed before the Supreme Court. Today there will be two judgments. One has been authored by the Chief Justice of India UU Lalit, and the other judgment has been authored by Justice Rabindra Bhatt. In Justice UU Lalit, the opinion of Justice Maheshwari is in consonance with the view of CJI, and the three other judges have given a different judgment. But we will have to wait whether these judgments have given different opinions or they have given same opinion on the basis of different grounds. So it will be clear once the Supreme Court pronounces the judgment. At least for the 7 days, Supreme Court heard various parties from 40 petitioners, and government and Supreme Court also heard arguments from some states as well. So it is a big day for the government as well as for the petitioners, because it is going to be a very crucial judgment. It will decide whether economic status of a person can be a ground of reservation in jobs and educational institutes or not.
All right, so we'll wait and watch through the day. Thank you so much, Vikas, for joining us and helping us understand this issue better. We'll come back to you again during the day when the Constitution Bench of the Supreme Court takes up the matter. Up next, we'll get you sports updates in our segment Sports Track.
So in some surprising news, Holger Rune.
Yes, Holger Rune's rapid rise hit a new milestone on Sunday at the Rolex Paris Masters, where the 19-year-old staged a stunning comeback to down six-time champion, in fact, Novak Djokovic 3-6, 6-3, 7-5, and clinch his maiden ATP title. Having dropped the first set, the Danish tennis player recovered from 0-40 in the opening game of the second and a 1-3 deficit in the third, saving 6 break points in the final game as he dug deep to defeat Djokovic and claim the biggest title of his young career in a dramatic fashion. Rune was playing in his 4th consecutive ATP Tour final and has now won 19 of his past 21 matches. The Dane's title run in Paris will also lift him to a career high number 10 in the Pepperstone ATP rankings on Monday. Also, this win against Djokovic made it 5 top 10 wins in as many days for Rune, who moved past Hubert Hurkacz, Andrei Rublev, Carlos Alcaraz and Felix Auger-Aliassime to reach his first Masters 1000 final.
So Holger Rune, that's the name we all should look out for in future if you're a tennis fan. Moving on to football now. First, Arsenal brushed aside Tottenham, then overcame Liverpool. And now the Gunners will spend another few days at the top of the Premier League table after another statement win from Chelsea. A statement win over Chelsea. Now, after Manchester City went to the Summit on Saturday, courtesy Erling Haaland's 95th minute penalty against Fulham, Arsenal responded with a 1-0 win at Stamford Bridge. Mikel Arteta's side are 2 points clear of second place City after 13 matches. City, chasing a 5th title in 6 seasons, will return to the top if they beat Brentford at Etihad Stadium next Saturday in the early kick-off. However, Arsenal will get to spend the following 6 weeks at the Summit if they defeat Wolves at the Molineux on the same day in the late kick-off.
And Team India defeated Zimbabwe in the last game of the Super 12 to finish as the table toppers of Group 2. India thrashed Zimbabwe by 71 runs at Melbourne Cricket Ground, and India set a target of 187 runs after winning the toss and elected to bat first. KL Rahul made 51 runs off 35 balls, while Surya Kumar Yadav made an unbeaten 61 runs off 25 balls. Chasing 187 runs, Zimbabwe had an awful start and the team lost early wickets, which put them in the back foot. The team eventually bundled out on 115 runs, handing India a 71 runs victory. The men in blue earlier had already qualified for the semi-finals after Netherlands' triumph over South Africa. They will now face England in the second semi-final in Adelaide on November 10th, while New Zealand will face Pakistan in the first semi-final at Sydney on November 9th.
So with that win, India reached the semi-finals of the T20 World Cup. But the other team that has qualified is Pakistan as well. Well, they have made it miraculously as they defeated Bangladesh on Sunday. Now, fans are very excited as they want to see India lifting the cup, T20 World Cup, after 15 years. But they also wish that they get to see India facing Pakistan in the final. Let's hear from the fans.
Alright, another convincing victory by Team India. They beat Zimbabwe by 71 runs and they have topped the group with 8 points, and they'll play England now in the semis at Adelaide. We have some fans with us. We'll try and talk to them. How do you want to celebrate India's victory, and what a convincing victory by India beating Zimbabwe?
First of all, we thank Sullivan giving the opportunity for us to speak. It's a wonderful victory, and especially MCG, it's a very lucky ground for India so far, like the first match between Pakistan, now the next match with Zimbabwe.
If you see 5 matches that India have played, they have won 4 matches, and in 2 matches Virat Kohli got man of the match, and in 2 matches Surya Kumar was the player of the match. You think their role will be very important against England in the semi-finals?
Yes, absolutely. Kohli and Surya Kumar Yadav are the 2 most important players in our team. What we have to also remember is that England has got a very strong batting lineup that has not delivered as yet, right? So you cannot take them lightly. The batting order is pretty tall. So in that case, I prefer that we play Chahal ahead of Akshay Patel. He hasn't had a good tournament. In fact, it's been below average. Chahal has been known as a good wicket taker. They should do that. And particularly the batting order has to be shuffled. Rohit Sharma hasn't delivered, so they might have to relook the way they open. But I think Pant should definitely play in He's one of the most explosive batsmen who can change the game within 5 minutes. He's an impact player. Pant has to play.
How will you celebrate Team India's victory today?
It was fabulous, like so much energy at the MCG, like almost similar to what India and Pakistan was, and like we are hoping to see India-Pakistan again in the finals.
So everyone is convinced here that Team India is going to win the World Cup after 15 years? Yeah! So can we have a final cheer for Team India? Absolutely, they're all ecstatic and they're confident that Team India is bringing the cup home again after 15 years. With cameraman Rakesh Kumar, this is Abhishek Mahajan in Melbourne for DD India.
All right. So in fact, India versus Pakistan is one match that is, be it the final. Team India in the final is one thing, and it's India versus Pakistan is another thing, and it is in fact a different mood of expectations and excitement altogether. So we'll have to keep our fingers crossed and see how the days ahead pan out. And Pakistan and India have joined New Zealand and England in confirming their semi-final spots at the ICC Men's T20 World Cup in Australia. India topped Group 2 after winning 4 of its 5 matches and will now play England at the Adelaide Oval in semi-final 2 on Thursday, that is 10th November. Pakistan, who finished second in Group 2 after beating Bangladesh on the final day of the group stage matches, will now play New Zealand at the Sydney Cricket Ground in the semi-final 1 on Wednesday, that is 9th November.
And after sports news, it's time to take a look at today's weather forecast. Fairly widespread light, moderate rainfall with isolated heavy falls very likely over Andaman and Nicobar Islands today and tomorrow. A low pressure area is likely to form over southwest Bay of Bengal, off the Sri Lankan coast. Tomorrow it is very likely to move northwestwards towards Tamil Nadu, Puducherry coasts with possible slight intensification during subsequent 48 hours. A western disturbance as a trough in the West Indies in low and middle tropospheric levels. Western disturbance also likely to affect western Himalayan region from 9th of November. Under its influence, scattered fairly widespread light moderate rainfall, snowfall likely over Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh, Gilgit-Baltistan and Muzaffarabad and Himachal Pradesh on 7th and 9th to 11th of November. And also now let's take stock of the temperatures across various cities.
Alright, that's it in this edition of Breakfast News this Monday morning. And before we go, we every day leave you with a reminder that news and updates continue on DD India, and also we leave you with some good feel-good visuals, which we are sure this feel-good factor stays on with you through the day as well. So let's see, what are we leaving you with today?
Yes, Preeti, every day we bring some stunning visuals from across the world, but today these visuals are from India, where tourists from across the world are descending in Rajasthan to enjoy the vibrant culture of India at the famed Pushkar fair that has started. So before we end the edition of Breakfast Show, we are leaving you with glimpses of the Pushkar Fair. Take a look. Namaskar. Namaskar.